Hello and welcome to the Communicate Great podcast. I am Tracy Poe, and we have an amazing guest with us tonight, Dr. Melissa Oden, and I will get to her in a second. But first, I want to give a shout out to our podcast sponsor, who is Lauren Patton. And Lauren is all about living a toxic-free life. And so she has just amazing products, and I will put her link in the description. And so if you're interested in learning more about Lauren and what she offers, go check her out. So Melissa, hello.
Hello. This has been a long time coming.
This has been a long time coming. So full disclosure, Melissa and I recorded a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and there were some significant technical difficulties and the echo was crazy bad. And so we were just starting over, and it was good stuff. It was so good. So anyhow, thank you for taking the time to come back on. I know that you constantly have a million balls in the air. And so just real quick, I know that you wear a lot of hats.
Mm-hmm.
So just for our listeners, before we get into communication and the tie-in with what you do in communication, do you just want to give our listeners / viewers an idea of what all you do?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for rescheduling those. You know what? This is such as the life of an entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only do we have technical glitches, but we wear a lot of hats as well. And so we're both probably pretty good representations of what this life is all about, but I wouldn't change it for the world. So I am a former college professor who got out of that crazy life. Actually, I say that I'm in it still very part-time, but not enough to, pay the bills or anything. So, but I do love it. And I do love my students, but talk about having to be a great communicator when you're a professor, right? So anyway, I currently own an online business, and I work with women who are facing the effects of chronic stress, which we can talk about in just a minute about how serious that is, particularly for women. But I work with them and coach them to help them rediscover the balance, growth, and purpose in their lives. And there's several different ways that I do that. But so that's mainly what I do. I am working on a few things right now. So again, we can talk about that in a minute if you'd like. But my background really is in medical social work and health education, and I'm a public health practitioner. And currently, I'm also the president of the Texas Public Health Association for the second time. I guess I am just a glutton for punishment and just felt like I needed to do that again. But I was president with them back in 2016, 17. Had such a great time that I decided I would do it this year. And really the cool thing about it is we're in our 100th birthday year. Wow. And so I'm presiding over our centennial birthday year. And I am the only woman and only member who has ever been president twice. So this is a rather historic year for us, and I'm super excited about that. I love to serve and I love to lead, and I love that organization. I've been with them over 20 years. So it's just such a pleasure to be able to do that. So yeah, I got a lot going on. I got a lot going on.
No, you really do. And so let's just jump into it. You mentioned stress, and actually before I even met you, I was watching somebody's podcast radio show. I don't even know what it was, but you were on someone else's show. And I remember the bug in the background, the Volkswagen, the van.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bug, it's a van. Before I get people saying, that's not a bug, it's not a van. It's a van. Okay. But you were talking about stress and the impact of stress with him. And so let's just talk about that for a second, because I remember as I was listening to some of what you were saying, I was just thinking of different people in my life who I was like, ooh, they need to hear this. Ooh, they need to hear this. Yeah. And so I know not only does stress impact our physical bodies, it impacts our mental health, it impacts our spiritual walk. Mm-hmm. It impacts it impacts every area of our life. I know that. But do you want to talk just very briefly, and I don't know, kind of what you had in mind to bring to us tonight about communication, but do you want to talk very briefly about how stress can impact the way in which we communicate with others and or ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you saw was about this time last year, actually. I was on the Podcast Business News Network, so the PBNN podcast. And Steve Harper was my host. And for all of those, I think I had 6 or 7 or 8 podcasts with him. Super
Wow.
fun. But we did delve pretty deeply into the work that I've been doing for the last decade, and that's around the female stress syndrome. And the way that God created us as women, stress actually affects us very differently than it does men. So I don't want to hear any men that are listening to this or watching this think that I'm saying that they don't have stress. They do. But the difference is that the way God created our bodies, women process that stress in a very different way. And in fact, stress is more deadly. It's more fatal for women than it is for men. Heart disease is actually the number 1 killer of women. It's not breast cancer, it's heart disease. And so the number 1 factor outside of genetics for heart disease is stress, long-term chronic stress. And so it's really important for women to understand that and for them to be able to mitigate that stress as quickly as possible. That's mostly what I do in my coaching practice, is help women do that. I use a specific framework to help women do that. But when you can't think straight because you're so stressed all the time, it's hard to find the words, and no, it's not Alzheimer's. It's stress. There are a lot of things that happen to you physiologically when you're stressed. And in fact, when I do my workshops, I've got 3 full PowerPoint slides of symptoms that women could be experiencing when they are experiencing the female stress syndrome. And by the time I get to the end of that 3rd slide, I'm depressed.
Wow.
There's so many things going on there. But mental lethargy is one of them. And the inability to have clarity in your thinking is certainly one of the first things that women in particular find when they find that they're under a ton of stress. And so if you're trying to communicate effectively with someone, it's really, really hard to do that when you've got the cortisol pumping, with those little, little glands, adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and it's constantly popping out cortisol, and everything is going wrong at that point. And once you get to adrenal burnout, that's very, very, very serious. So I try to keep my clients from getting there, although some of them come to me that way, and that's okay. We can fix that. It takes a while, but it can be fixed. But yeah, if you really want to communicate well, let's keep the mind clear. And one of the best ways to do that is to mitigate stress.
Okay, so adrenal burnout. This is the first I've heard this term. So not that it has anything to do with communication, but can you just explain what that is? Because I'm curious.
Yeah. So there are 2 glands that sit one on each the top of your kidneys, called your adrenal glands, and that's where your cortisol is held. Now, cortisol is famously known as your fight or flight hormone. So let's just say you're being chased by a bear. Okay, so you're running away from that bear, and that cortisol is pumping out as fast as possible to give you the extra energy that you need to get away from the bear. Ideally, your body is created to, once that threat is over, then the cortisol stops, you have time to recover, and then you have a replenishment for the next time you're being chased by a bear. Okay. Here's the problem. We're under such chronic stress that our bodies don't know that we're not being chased by a bear. And so it's pumping out and pumping out and pumping out all the time. Well, eventually there's not going to be any more. It's going to end. And you are so women who tell me that they can't sleep, they have constant headaches, that they are crying all the time, that they're depressed, that they are fatigued, that they have no energy, and this is the phrase I hear, I've got nothing left. That always indicates to me adrenal burnout. And it is incredibly serious, because if you don't have the ability to respond in a fight or flight situation, you're dead. I mean, seriously.
Wow.
If you can't get away from the bear metaphorically, then you're dead. And so it's very important to nourish the kidneys and the adrenals and make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you don't get to that point. Because once you get to that point, it takes a couple of years to recover from that. It can be done. It can be done. But it's a long-term thing. Ask my mom. I watched her go through that some years ago. So and ask any other woman that has been diagnosed with that. They'll tell you the same thing. It's a long haul. And so I have an online course called Women in Stress Reclaiming Your Life. In that course, we talk about, stress. In the very beginning, I say stress relief is not about dark chocolate and wine and bubble baths. Those are great and wonderful. I do them. It's wonderful. I'm not saying don't do them. But what I really want to delve into is the cognitive behavioral relationship between you and stress. And let's get you straight and let's get your body working so that you have optimal, response ability, right? So that you're not stumbling for words and you're not wondering where, why I can't stay in bed 15 hours a day. And, that's not okay. That might be okay for Christmas break, but once that's over, we need to get back to life. And so, I equate all of this to kind of like a frog being boiled. A lot of women probably don't come to me like they should because they just don't know what's happening. When you're a frog in a pot of water, the heat is turned up so slowly that you die of being boiled before you even know you're being boiled. And I think that happens to a lot of women. And so probably a lot of your listeners are probably like, well, dang, I didn't know I had that going on. now that could explain a lot, right?
Right. No, and that makes sense because, I would wonder, being women entrepreneurs, there are times when I have so much going on that I can't even formulate a thought because I don't know which thought to think. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I would just imagine, I'm just going to flat out give a commercial for you right here. If you are a woman entrepreneur, I would just suggest, just talking to Dr. Melissa and going on her website, checking her out just to see, are you in that boat? Are you not sleeping? All of the things. And so I would imagine, if you've been a listener of the podcast for a while, I talk about intrapersonal, and it's fun when I have people come up to me and use the term and look at me like, oh, I listened. So intrapersonal is communicating with yourself, right? But if you are in such a state that you can't even communicate with yourself, you can't even put those thoughts together to know, gosh, I would think that would be a clear indication that maybe you do need to just figure out what's going on.
Yeah. And let me just say too, I've been a natural health practitioner for 25 years. So the things that I recommend and the things that are in that course are all naturally based because we don't need it. You're already stressed enough. You don't need any other synthetic things going through your body to complicate things. But the other thing that's really important that you brought up that does absolutely have to do with communication, and that is being able to tell yourself the truth about where you are. And one of the things that I talk about in my coaching program, and this is not my phrase, it actually belongs to the founder of the company that I'm with, but he says that where you are is just where you are. It's not who you are. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that daily because, and by the way, I don't teach anything I've not been through or maybe going through right now. And I've had, I've had a very challenging year. Maybe one of these days I'll be able to tell that story, but it's been a very challenging year for me and probably the most stress that I had, ironically enough, the most stress I have ever been under as an adult woman. And, having that happen in midlife is also a challenge because midlife is no joke. So any of your listeners out there who are midlife women, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I am not suggesting anything that I have not done or am doing because I know it works. I know it works. And so even through my challenges, I have to remind myself, you got this, none of this was a surprise to God. He's got you and you know how to do this too. So between the two of you, it's going to be okay. And that's what I would say to your listeners and your viewers. It really is going to be okay. But sometimes you need to reach out for help. And that's going to be on you to do. That's going to be on you.
Exactly. So you mentioned that you take people through a process. Now, is this the 7 things? Okay. I don't want to give too much away because that's your deal. But so when you think about the 7 things, and I don't know if you want to go through all of those with our viewers/listeners, but if you don't, pick 1 or 2 of those 7 things that really tie into communication and talk about that.
Yeah. So let me tell you what the 7 things are. And then I will also just very quickly tell you the 7 accelerators and 7 blockers. So I'm actually a certified life coach for a company called ULA, and ULA is a completely made up word, but it means a state of awesomeness. And so, living ULA, if you guys have seen my post where it says live ULA, and I've got all this ULA stuff on my social, It really is about living your best life and living a balanced life that has growth and purpose attached to it. And so our 7 key areas that we help to balance people in are fitness, finance, family, field, which is your career, faith, friends, and fun. So those are the 7 overarching areas of life. In your ULA life, you're going to have blockers and accelerators. So the accelerators, which means you get to that life more quickly, you have gratitude, love, discipline, integrity, passion, humility, and wisdom. And then the blockers, clearly, the ones that are going to keep you from getting there as quickly, are fear, guilt, anger, self-sabotage, laziness, envy, and focus, meaning lack of or misdirected. So a couple of those that kind of relate to communication. I mean, let's talk about family. We've got the holidays coming up pretty soon, and a lot of us have family coming in, or we're going to be with family. And this one is always kind of a hard one, especially when family relationships are strained, or when you don't have the best family relationships. This one's really hard for me because my family's phenomenal. I had to leave it to Beaver childhood. My core family is still very tight. In fact, we get tighter the older we get. And so for me, I have a lot of gratitude for that. But I do recognize that there are people out there who they're going to struggle this holiday season. So what are the things that you're going, have a plan going into that situation? What are the things that you're going to do? What are the things that you're going to say and not say? Right? They're going to get you through those holidays with very little trauma, because family can be difficult. It just can be. We're all human. We're human. So have a plan going into that situation, and just know that you are going to determine in your heart that you're going to do your best to communicate as well as you know how to do. And also know that a lot of things that people say about you and around you aren't about you. It's about them, right? So I always tell my clients, put on your rubber suit, just let it fall off. Just let it slide right on off, because that is not about you. And that's one of the hardest things to do, because the words can hurt. Words can hurt a lot. I mean, talk about some baseline communication issues. I mean, words can hurt. So, I would say to you, just be very cognizant of what you're saying and thinking, and just make sure that everything that you're saying and doing is coming from the right spot. And then there's nothing you can do about what's coming out on the other side. There's just not anything that you can do. So I would definitely have a plan in that regard. Let's see, what else can we talk about in terms of communication? How about friends? We talk a lot in ULA about unfriend, delete, and block.
Because I like that.
Toxic relationships can really affect your health. They can affect definitely your communication. They can affect so many different things, but I would say the same thing. If you've got friends that you're having trouble communicating with, or that aren't communicating with you, or every time you do have an interaction with them that it doesn't make you feel good, that should be a red flag that you need to reevaluate that. And just again, not being mean or mean-spirited or anything like that, but you need to decide for yourself, is this person someone I need to keep in my inner circle? Or do I really just kind of need to keep them at arm's length? We've got those concentric circles, right? We've got our inner sanctum, and then we've got our, group of small friends. And then as the circles go out, it's, coworkers and stuff like that. So, if you're hesitant to just completely eliminate somebody from your life, figure out which circle they need to go in. And really only have what we call your front row people in the seats in the front of the bus with you, because those are the ones who are going to help keep you balanced, and they're also probably going to keep you from doing stupid stuff. And
or at least they'll try.
They're gonna try. They're absolutely gonna try. But even communication with your friends is a really important consideration in your life, because they always say, look at the 5 closest people around you, and that's who you're going to be like. If they have great communication skills, and if all of you are communicating appropriately, you're good to go. But if you find somebody in that circle who's not, I would just say take a minute to reevaluate and just make a decision about what you need to do about that.
I like that.
For you, because you're worth it.
Right. I like that. Okay. All right. Well, good, good. Okay. So anything else that you can think of in terms of what you do, how it ties into communication, advice you can give people, um, just nuggets of wisdom, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I want to just circle back around really quickly to the idea of being able to tell yourself the truth, to
Oh, thanks.
communicate your truth to yourself. And what I mean by that is that if you are stuck, if you are in this chronic, hamster wheel of stress, you have got to at some point stop and ask yourself, first of all, is it me? 9 times out of 10, it probably is. And I'm saying that about me too. But get real honest with yourself about what's happening
Mm,
and why it's happening.
mm,
And it's only then can you communicate with yourself about how you can change that. And again, sometimes you need a coach, sometimes you need a counselor, sometimes you need a therapist. But whoever it is, get some help from somebody. I know in just a couple of weeks, our ULA community is getting together. Unfortunately, I can't be there this year, but we're gathering together in Nashville for ULA Palooza. This is our community wide. This is not just for coaches ambassadors. This is for our community wide group. Anybody who's interested in ULA can go to Nashville, and we're going to be at the Wild Horse Saloon. And that's the weekend that everybody plans for the next year and sets
mm,
those goals. And as a community, we sit at those tables together and we encourage each other and we talk to each other. And it is the most impactful thing I think I have ever been to. It is the most wonderful community I've ever been a part of outside of my church family. And that is a really great place to be able to tell yourself the truth, because you've got nobody in that room except people who are supporting you and cheering you on and saying, you know what you need to do, and we're here to help you get there. And so even if you can't go to Ulapalooza, you've got someplace you can go. If it's the lobby of a local hotel, go get some coffee and sit in the lobby for a couple of hours and take your journal and start writing some things. I've got some journal prompts if anybody wants to take a look at those about, how you can start thinking through that. Cause I think getting started sometimes the hardest part.
mhm,
So, again, just being able to communicate with yourself and tell
mhm,
yourself the truth about who you are
mhm,
and where you are. And remember that you can change.
mhm.
That is the message tonight. You can make that change. And if you need to communicate your needs to someone else, please choose someone that you can trust, and please don't hesitate to go and do that, because there is something about communicating that to other people that is entirely therapeutic.
Mhm.
Even if that person's not a therapist, if they're a really
Right.
good listener, then you've got gold there. If you've got somebody that you can really trust, that you can just say those things to, and all of a sudden it takes on a whole new meaning for you. So
Right.
just be very clear about who you are and why you're where you are, and let's figure out how to get you out of that if you're not happy with it.
I want to kind of stay on that for a second, talking about figuring out where you are. One of the things I talk to people about is trace it back. And
Mm-hmm.
so I actually have a reel that I started recording and I never got it out. But anyhow, think about a weed. We have these nutgrass. I don't know if you know what nutgrass is, but apparently it's a weed. It's a weed grass. And it grows higher than at least our grass. And so it always sticks out.
Mm.
So when I'm out in our yard and I see some, I go, but I kind of trace it down to the ground, because if you pull it when it's up, you're not going to get the roots. And so you literally have to trace it down to the ground as far as you can so that you can pull up the roots. And so it's just like that. We have to trace back what is going on internally. We have to really, you are 100%, we have to be honest with ourselves. So we have to trace it back, trace it back. We have to keep
Yeah.
digging down to figure out and pull out what is at the root of whatever we've got going on in our lives.
And
And so,
yes. Oddly enough, that is how natural health works, by the way. It's like peeling the layers back of an onion.
mm,
So Western medicine only looks at symptoms. They don't look at root causes. And so
mm,
when you start getting into natural health and complementary and alternative medicine, what we do is we look at root causes. Now, we can trace that all the way back to emotions from childhood. In fact, we can trace them back to in utero, right? I mean, that's how far back we can go with that kind of stuff. And so when we start to address those things, getting to that is a little bit more complicated. It's like peeling the layers back of an onion to get to the core of what's going wrong with you physically. And 9 times out of 10, what's going wrong with you physically is going wrong up here. And I don't mean anybody's crazy. It's your mindset. It's your thought process. It's those old tapes that are playing. And okay, I'm a Gen Xer. Tapes playing in the back of your head that have been there for years, and you have not pushed the stop button on that tape player yet. So that's what good coaching can do for you, is to really, and that's why all my courses are set up like cognitive behaviorally, because we need to get to the root of that. I'm not doing you any good if I just slap a Band-Aid on your symptom and say, I hope you have a good life. We need to get to the root of this so that we can actually see some change. And that's scary. And so you need to be with somebody who can, really kind of hold your hand and reassure you and give you some really grounded information and education and advice when needed, so that you can get to where you need to go. Right. So just be careful. Just be careful who you surround yourself with and who you choose to share that stuff with, because not everybody in your group is there for you. Truth bomb.
Well, no. And so we communicate great. We did a podcast, a three series in our podcast. We're on the podcast. What am I saying? And it was on low self-esteem and how that impacts your communication and therefore impacts your relationships. And one of the tips so the first episode, we talk about how it impacts you and why you need to really focus on that. And then the next 2 are tips on how to build your self-esteem. And one of them is surround yourself with positive people. Now here's the caveat, not a yes person, right? You don't want somebody who's just going to say what they think you want them to say or that you want to hear. It's going to be somebody who will speak the truth to you in love. And that's the key, in love. And so if you are surrounding yourself with those positive people that you can rely on, hey, here's what's going on. What are you seeing in me? Do I need to go talk to a therapist or whatever, counselor, whatever? So I think it is super, super important to think about who we are surrounding ourselves with. The other thing is that it's a choice. I used to have a book. I loaned it to somebody, never got it back, and it was called Happiness is a Choice. And so I think there are times when we know we're not okay, and we just choose to not do anything about it. And go ahead.
And here's my tough love for tonight. I get it that some people have had a rough upbringing. I get it that there has been trauma in people's lives. I get it. And I'm not unsympathetic to that. But if you're an adult and you're listening to this, I say this with all the love in my heart. At what point do you realize that you're an adult and you have the power to change your future? You may not be able to change your past, but you as an adult have 100% power to change your future. You do not have to operate in the past. And what I find is that a lot of people like to, and this is probably gonna step on some toes, but a lot of people like to live in the past because there is secondary gain from that. People get things from that. People get things from having other people feel sorry for them. And I'm bringing this up because this is what we deal with in healthcare. This is what we deal with when we're looking at emotional root causes of physical illness, physical dis-ease. Is that people get secondary gain from being sick. And why in the world would somebody want to change that when they're getting attention for something that, is ailing them? And I know that sounds cold and cruel, and I don't mean it to. I'm just trying to bring light to a real situation in that, so I'll just throw myself under the bus and give you an example. I mean, when I was diagnosed at the age of 24 with stage 4 endometriosis, I was in a pretty serious marriage relationship that was breaking down rapidly. And, the thing that they told you back then was get pregnant so that the endo will go away. Right. Well, we tried forever and I never could get pregnant. Praise God for that now, because I'm not married to that person anymore. It was very difficult for me to be in that place and say to someone else, my marriage is falling apart. I think this is the end, because that wasn't supposed to happen. If you were raised in a Christian home, you weren't supposed to get divorced. That wasn't supposed to happen. And so what happened to me was, because I had this big illness going on, and listen, none of this was at the forefront of my mind. I only figured this out after the marriage was over, after I went into remission, and I had some time to process and think about it. And I went, you know what? I've been playing the victim this whole time. And I'm keeping myself sick because of the way that I'm thinking about this. And on my 30th birthday, I sat straight up in the bed and I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And from that point forward, I was no longer playing the victim. I took responsibility where I needed to, and I did everything that I could to heal myself, which is, by the way, the tagline of my company, which is helping people heal. So that's where all of this came from my own experience. And my own healing experience. So I'm telling you from personal experience, I probably stayed sick because I was getting attention for that when I was in a very, very bad relationship that was breaking down, and yet I felt like I couldn't say anything because I wasn't supposed to get divorced. You know, Christian marriages weren't supposed to fall apart like that. You know, and so I was getting the attention that I needed. And again, I didn't know it. It was all, you know, undercover, right? But when I realized what was happening, I put a full stop to that because I'm like, I can't live like this. I cannot live like this. And I think from that point forward, I'm 53 now. It's been 23 years since I had that realization. You know, I've had the occasional seasonal cold, you know, the sinus stuff. We live in Texas, for goodness sake. I mean, you know, we sneeze and, you know, whatever, a couple of bouts of bronchitis here and there. But other than that, I've been fairly healthy, you know, because I made a decision not to let that affect me anymore, and not to be so. And there's a lot more to it, and it's you know, it's not as easy as I make it sound, and I don't mean to make it sound like that for your listeners or your viewers, but what I'm telling you is that it is possible for you to get out of that cycle, but you're going to need some help to do it, more than likely.
Right.
So communicate with yourself, tell yourself that, you know what, where I am, it's just where I am. It's not who I am.
Right. I love it. Okay. Well, I'm just going to give you another commercial. If this is you and you feel like you really need to talk to somebody to figure out where things are for you physically and how much of it ties into your mindset, if you feel like you've got that, what did you call it, adrenal burnout, or close to the adrenal burnout, why don't you give our friend Dr. Melissa Oden a shout so she can help you figure some things out. But I appreciate you coming on, and I've just really enjoyed getting to know you over the last, maybe how long have we known? I don't even know how long we're gonna.
Not even a year yet. But yeah, it's been so much fun. And one other thing about that, I'll just say, if you go to my website at drmelissaoden.com, you're going to get a pop-up box, and there's going to be a quiz right there that you can take that will tell you, you know, how stressed you are, and it'll show you in the 7 key areas kind of what you need to work on first, because we don't want to work on all 7. That's not going to work for you. It doesn't work for anybody. It's too much. So it'll give you an opportunity to find out about where you are in terms of that. And then we can go from there if you want to reach out, and we'll figure out where to plug you in to the programs that I have. So yeah.
Wow. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And, you know, I'm looking forward. I know we've talked about doing some things in the future together. So looking forward to that. And I will definitely put Dr. Melissa Oden's information in the description so you can go follow the links, check her out. And, you know, you can always get a hold of her through me. We're in contact with each other. So thank you again. And I appreciate it. And everyone, we will see you next time.